Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our Accedo Playback podcast. I'm your host today. I'm Lucy Trang Nguyen. I'm the Director of Strategic Alliances and Business Development for Emerging Technologies at Accedo. And today's episode is going to be a very special one. We're diving into the XR Sports Alliance. In short, it's XRSA. And we will be talking about our very first experimentation deployment. This is a major milestone for us, and I'm so excited to unpack this and how it all came together with two of the people who've been very instrumental in actually making it happen. So I'm joined today by our two fantastic guests, our dearest partners, Laurence Boyd, the Chief Content and Product Officer at E1 Series, the world's first electric powerboat championship. With a background in content production, tech innovation, Laurence has helped shape how fans experience live sport, bringing concepts like real-time data overlays and augmented reality into mainstream coverage. At E1, Laurence oversees everything from the host broadcast and digital content to fan engagement, always with an eye on how emerging technologies can make sport more immersive and accessible. And of course, we have Charles-Edwin Root. He's the digital manager at HBS, the global host broadcaster behind some of the world's biggest sporting events, and he's driving and developing innovation services for media partners of some of the most prestigious competitions worldwide. Lawrence and Charles, welcome to the show.
Thanks for
Hello.
having me.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hello, hello. I'm actually super excited today because we get to talk about our passion project. It's been our passion project for over a year already. So before we dive into the deployment itself, let's set the stage for our listeners a little bit. So the XR Sports Alliance is an initiative that Accedo, Qualcomm, and HBS we co-founded in summer last year, and it has grown into a community of rights owners, telcos, OEMs, technology companies, and partners working all together to accelerate the XR adoption in sports. And in total, today, we're actually 22 members, pioneering companies all over the space in XR as well as in sports, with companies like Google, XReal, Red Bull, Premier Lacrosse, MLSE, and many, many more. And of course, E1, you guys have been an early member. Actually, the E1 series, you guys were the part of the very first cohort, and HBS, of course, you guys are our co-founding members. So the very first question is to both of you: how would you describe the XR Sports Alliance from your perspective? What does it mean to you, the alliance, as a founding member and early member?
Okay, let's go. So thanks for your presentation, Lucy. I think from our perspective as host broadcaster for, as you said, big sports events, we provide a variety of different services for the broadcasters, and some of these services are basically producing immersive content. So we have started in 2018 with the World Cup, and we are still delivering this type of service for the broadcaster. And we have noticed that we have gained a lot of expertise into how create compelling stories and how we build a good experience to those broadcaster. But we've also seen, and I think we all agree on that, that the market in terms of monetization for that content is not ready yet. And we really saw the XRSA as a strong opportunity, but also a nice mandate to develop this market. And it will benefit to those broadcasters to being able to monetize this content in the end. So that's really something that we see is really like improving our services for the broadcaster, but also sharing the knowledge inside this XRSA and with all the members that is looking after immersive content also in a mid or long term way.
Thank you, Charles. Lawrence, what about you?
So I think from an E1 perspective, the XRSA presented an opportunity to learn from people operating at the cutting edge of immersive technology. The founding partners, HBS, Qualcomm, and Accedo, are incredibly knowledgeable and and working to sort of create this framework for commercialization of immersive content. And from our perspective, we were very interested in immersive content. And as a challenger sport, we have the opportunity to do things that other sports with more structure and more complicated structures would find hard to do. So it was an opportunity for us to learn from people who really know what they're talking about what we can do, but also about what the wider space is going to do in immersive technology.
Can you both comment maybe a little bit about why the timing? Why was now the right time to actually come together?
So from an E1 perspective, we'd already created a tech stack that was going to allow us to create immersive content. We have AR and VR in our broadcast production because it allows us to put sponsorship and the outline of the race course into our broadcast product. So we were immersive ready, if you like. And also we were very early on in our journey. Just 5 races had taken place when we first started talking, Lucy, and so it wasn't too early to do something new and innovative.
And on our perspective, I think this market can develop very fast, and there is so many different sports and so many different contexts of producing those sports, especially with immersive. So I think starting now to try to test and understand what are the user wants, but also how can we make this content possible, because it's not just about selecting some positions. So also about understanding the limitation of the cameras, the workflows, the technology behind it, and etc. And I think there is a lot to learn, and maybe not so much time to be ready for.
Great. I think from our perspective, from the Accedo standpoint, we were seeing that the market was evolving, right? And everybody was already doing so many experiments, proof of concepts, pilots, all of these years, including us and you guys, and so many other partners out there. But now we were seeing in the hardware market that the hardware was really delivering high quality experiences, right? So it started with, of course, MetaQuest delivering high quality experiences. Then Apple Vision Pro came in, and then we also saw that Android XR was launched and announced. So naturally, because we were in this media landscape, we had to be ready to talk to our content partners. And we had to be ready to advise them which hardware, which platform to invest in. And we then just noticed that we could actually not do this alone, because we already tried, right? We tried so many proof of concept and pilots as many others, but it made sense to actually come together to solve the big ecosystem challenges all together instead of each of us in a siloed way. So that's the mission of the XR Sports Alliance, right? Really to break these boundaries. And we talked to sports right owners like you, Laurence, to try to understand what kind of knowledge and data you guys need to actually build a business case, right? Why should you invest into XR today? And of course, Charles, you being with HBS and working with all of these big sporting events, you know also very well what kind of data they are looking for. And then we put together all of these experiments that we're working on, try to do user testing, collect user feedback as well, to then actually put together a sustainable business case. So let's now talk about that big milestone, our very first XRSA deployment with the E1 series. Maybe this question first to you, Laurence. For our listeners who may not be very familiar, what makes E1 series such a special property to capture in XR? What makes it such a good fit for XR?
So as you said at the beginning, E1 is the world's first electric powerboat racing championship, and we have teams owned by some of the biggest stars in sport and entertainment, from Rafa Nadal to Will Smith to Mark Anthony to LeBron James. But critically for the content acquisition that went on at our Lago Maggiore race this year, we race in beautiful places. Our boats are very beautiful. We have a team of mixed male and female pilots racing for the teams. So it's visually very beautiful sport. And there's a lot to see both in the cockpits of the boats and around the edges of the sport itself. So I thought that it presents a really good opportunity to be able to tell richer stories in an immersive way.
And it is water sports, right? So if you think about putting in the water, there's so many challenges in itself. So for us as the XRSA was actually an interesting case to look at you guys because you have this unusual setup too.
Yeah, it's super challenging sport to produce, not least because we had done so few events as a brand new sport, but also because we're capturing all of our signals on water and sending them back to land to be mixed and turned into programs. So yeah, very challenging, which also makes it very interesting.
Agreed. I'd like to give our listeners a little bit of an overview or an idea how an XR deployment in a real sports production setting actually looks like and how it actually works. So this was a bit of an unusual setup because as every other sports rights owner, you guys, E1, you already had your existing production company, right? So XRSA and HBS, we came into your existing workflow and try to collaborate with you on this production workflow, which already is a very tight-knit process. So this question is really to Charles, to you, and to Laurence, both of you. Can you both describe a little bit how our collaboration process looked like and what needed to be planned out and how did we actually deploy it?
Yeah, I can start. So we identified the scope first of this experimentation. Basically, the main goals was to collect learnings about what can generate the best sensation of immersion. How do you make something interesting to watch? Because those two are not necessarily the same thing. The difference between the different formats. What triggers motion sickness? Because there was this water aspect, so that was really important for us to understand. Okay, are we going to be dizzy when watching the content if it's filmed on water? And after discussing with E1 team and a production company, we identify the different positions and then we try to understand, okay, what's the running order and how do we match into these workflows so we don't bother them too much because that was not the goal. Obviously, they have to deliver a world-class event. So, and we are doing experimentation. So we need, to be careful on how heavy we are to stress their teams and etc. So the idea was really to how can we complement and not change too much of our workflows, as you said. And basically, it was discussions defining the different camera plan and etc. And then I think it may be something for a later stage, but we will discuss about how we activate it operationally speaking, which is always a bit different than what you plan. But thankfully, we've planned enough, so we didn't add too much hiccups, and it went good. But maybe, Laurence, you want to add your perspective on it and how you have seen and felt this collaboration with us.
For sure. So look, from any one perspective, it was reasonably light lifting, and I think the part of the requirements of being involved in a startup sport is that you are willing to try things and experiment and collaborate. Importantly, collaborate, because E1 is a collaboration. It's not just one production company. It's a broadcast facilities company, a specialist camera company, an AR VR company, and everybody is excited about doing new and different things, and that's why they're involved in the E1 world. So we had a few planning calls. We got people excited about the opportunity to do something different. We explained to them what was going to happen, and then the HBS team arrived, and I would like to think that they had a great experience.
We had some sunburns, as you know, but, but it was. I think we did a good job in the end.
Yes, you were all red when you came back from that trip. But Charles, so why don't you talk a little bit about maybe the challenges or the opportunities that you saw at that production when we were collaborating with the E1 team? What were things that were maybe a little bit unusual or things we didn't even think about, like the heat and all of that stuff?
No, yeah, exactly. And I think I want to use an example for that to illustrate I don't want to say the difficulty, but the adaptation you need to have for producing this content. So basically, E1, they have what they call smart marks. So it's basically a buoy that is on the water, that is defining the limits of a track. And we had the idea to put a 360 camera on it because we were thinking that it was the best position to capture footage as closest as possible to the boats in action. And then when we arrived on site, we discussed with the people in charge of this, and they were telling us that they were sending those smart marks way in advance of the race. So our initial idea that was to put the camera on the buoy and then let it there and try to trigger it somehow remotely was not possible. First, because the camera was not able to do that, and second, because the battery would have gone dry. So we did two things. First, we've sent the camera on the buoy. We've set the camera on the buoy, and then the buoy went to the track, and then we were going with our little boat that Iwan provided, because they have such security, of course. So we use that boat to trigger it and then go back. But we had to do that in short time because the race was happening just after. So, and the boat doesn't need to be should not be close to this buoy when the race is running up, etc. So we had to make sure that the timing was tight and well planned. And then there was also the aspect of taking back the camera, which is probably not easy. So we had to take a hook and then try to find the smart marks and try almost fall in the water. But this is the small things that when you want to test also, because obviously if it was for something live or other things, the setup would have been thought differently, but we also have to mind the budget. So we need also to find some workarounds and things like that. So this is exactly a concrete example of the different workarounds and how we would have implemented this type of positions. And then it was also a lot of taking the opportunities when they were coming. I think at some point we discussed with Laurence, and there was at the podium there are super big. I don't know exactly the name of those super big Magnum kind of champagnes bottle. But
a Jeroboam champagne.
Yeah, exactly. That's huge. I've never seen a bottle that big. And we had the idea to put a camera on it. So, and then we just discussed Laurence. So Laurence said, "Yeah, let's go." So then it was super easy. He gave us the contact of the people managing the podium. So then we arranged that and etc. And we put this 360 camera on the bottle. So the idea was that when the pilots were like taking the bottle and celebrating and etc., would have super good shots, maybe a bit too creative for immersive, but we were also thinking about social media content and etc. And well, in the end, we didn't manage to have this footage because we learned one of the things is that those cameras overheat quite quickly, and it was a super hot and intense day of summer in Lago Maggiore, where we did the experiment, and the camera overheated after I think 10 minutes, and it was just the time that the pilots were on podium to start celebrating. So, and because we had to play record, before, because we could not just wait a minute, we're going to go on the podium and then play record. That's not possible, of course. So those are the small things that I would say, trying to find workarounds on sites on how we want to activate the different positions, but also keeping an open mind about what all the opportunities we have not thought on paper that are maybe super interesting to activate. We had also some position on the pontoon where the pilots are going to the boats and coming back to the hangar and etc. Because we noticed after a day that they were talking a lot, that they were really close and etc. And here we had some spots to just put a camera where we could play record. We don't bother anything. We don't bother the TV production and etc. But we can get really good immersive footage. This immersive footage, I think we will talk about that at a later stage about the feedback of the user and etc. But it's also about the sensation, the feeling of being somewhere that you are not usually are, or where you can't be as a spectator. So it's also this sentiment that we try to get as much as possible.
Laurence, when you think about what immersive can actually enable or empower your fans to do, is it that they can access behind the scenes footage, have that sensation of actually being close to the athletes? Or what is it for you? What brings value to the users for immersive?
I like to think about a sort of access all areas pass that's provided by immersive. So it's access to the pilots, but also to the technology. So one of the most interesting learnings from the shoot was that putting actually a 180 camera in the cockpit of the boat was incredibly interesting to look at, because only probably 50 people in the history of the world have sat in an E1 cockpit. But with an immersive headset on, anybody in the world can sit in an E1 cockpit and see what's going on there. And the steering wheel is very interesting. There's lots of dials to look at. And when you have somebody explaining what's going on in there, and also you have the ability to look around where they're talking to you, well, that suddenly becomes a really interesting access all areas perspective.
We were lucky that we were actually working directly with you, Laurence, right? The Chief Content and Production Officer. But if we were to talk to other sports rights owners, just for the audience out there, who are the people you need to convince to actually do such an XR deployment?
So look, our world is very small. There may be 350 people on site working on any one production, from the teams and the broadcast operators and so on. So if you have an advocate at a high level in a business who can go around and convince everybody else, then you're in a good place. So the first thing I would say is get somebody high up who's bought into the success of immersive to agree that this is a good idea and become an advocate for you within the rights owner. The second thing is you need support across the board, because you need the operations team to be bought in. You need anybody else who's involved in production to be bought in. You might need the health and safety people to be brought in, particularly if you're like us and you're operating on water and you need to get a boat to go out to a smart mark. So critically, someone high up, but then buy hearts and minds across the organization, because you're going to need a lot of people to help you along the way.
That sounds like we need to talk to all the people, everybody involved. But let's talk a little bit about the learnings, right? So we did capture all of the footage on site in Italy at the race, and after that, Accedo built the test application, the user experience, and then we've done early user testings, right? And Laurence, I also know that you guys have showed the experience at one of your other races in Miami. Could we maybe share a little bit of the early learnings, what users have been saying? And Charles, please feel free to pitch in there too.
So look, I think the first thing is my own perspective when I first saw the experience, which was, wow, this is so much cooler than I thought it would be. And there's so many opportunities to make it even better. But I think from a user perspective, the first thing is they love immersive. From an experiential point of view, giving people this sort of intimate view of what it's like to be in a cockpit, or what it's like to be on a boat, or how it is to be really close to a boat or close to an athlete. That's super cool. And generally, the people who were getting the experience at any one race were doing it just before a race was about to happen, and it might change their perspective on what they're about to see or who they might be rooting for in the next race. So look, that's what you want from a fan experience. You want it to give them something that makes them care more about what's about to happen, which I think critically it does.
Yeah, and if I can add also a few other user feedback, is that, as I think I've mentioned in the beginning, we're trying to understand the motion sickness, because we know that is something very different for each people, and etc. And having the water as an aspect of capturing this content will generate maybe more motion sickness. So we did a lot of different testing, like with a Steadicam, without a Steadicam, with a tripod, without tripod, and things like that. And in the end, we were quite surprised that very few people perceived motion sickness on this footage, no matter the different conditions we filmed the content with. So, for example, we've put a camera on a drone, no motion sickness. We've put a camera inside the boat, in cockpit, no motion sickness. We've put it on the boat, over the cockpit, no motion sickness as well. On the smart marks on the buoy, no motion sickness. So we were like super surprised, and pretty happy also with the outcome. And this is based on qualitative feedback from different people we've done the test, but also from quantitative feedback. So this is some statistical proof behind it, and we really are confident about how we can produce content without motion sickness. Um, Also, we've understood a lot more of the limitations of the cameras that we are using currently. So the 360 camera, as I said, they are overheating a lot. If they are not in movement, it's really hard to film them more than 10 minutes because we need to film in 8K. So it has enough quality in headset. The battery also is something to consider. The size of the tripod needs to be like pretty big, so it's really stable when you film in 180. All those different like technical learnings. And then also, I think we discovered that with Laurence that we can really do one work with two targets, but we capturing immersive content and etc. And then it can have a second life on social media because you are capturing such a big aspect ratio that then you can crop into any other aspect ratio. And so it has a lot of value on social media, especially because those positions are so behind the scene or so exclusive. So it's also something very interesting for social media. And because of the footage, you can do creative edits as well. That has a good value on social media. So we learn those things, and I think there's still a lot to learn, to be honest, because it also really based on the sport, on the venue, and etc. So we have to test for all the sports because the position won't be the same, the opportunities of content won't be the same, and etc. But I think we already had good amount of feedback around this experimentation.
Yeah, that would have been my next question actually. So whenever we talk to sports right owners, the question is one of the questions would always be, okay, now we're capturing immersive footage. If we were to build our own direct-to-consumer application, yes, then we can distribute the immersive videos that we capture. But are there other avenues to leverage immersive footage? So social media is one of the things that Charles just mentioned. Laurence, is there any for you as the chief product manager at E1, officer at E1? How would you build in immersive into your roadmap today?
Well, one of the things I think that's really interesting about where immersive is going is how quickly the devices are becoming accessible and how good they are. But there's a lack of content for them. So what my view is we should be creating immersive content, and we should be getting it to content aggregators and people who are going to create immersive experiences, not necessarily in an owned app, but to places where early adopters of this technology are going to be going to find any kind of content. So I would be saying that the next challenge for me is distributing the content and finding people who will put E1 content within their immersive app, so that I can find fans for the future. I know that to get a new fan for a sport, you have to get them ideally when they're 8, 9, 10 years old. That's when you build real affinity to a sport or a team or an athlete. We also know that young people love immersive content and they love being active when they're consuming content. So I think it's a good calculation, a good calculated risk for me to create some immersive content that is going to go on devices that are going to be used by young people who are looking to find their teams and their sports for the future.
Love that. Love the fact that you mentioned interactive immersive content as well. So, Charles, we've been brainstorming for so many sessions already, all of the ideas and the collections, what kind of things we should be testing next. And one of the things that you actually mentioned, Charles, is interactive immersive content, right? Editorial pieces, point and click adventures and experiences. Can you elaborate on that? What it actually means, and also what does it mean for the sports fan then in the future if they were to interact with the content like this?
Yeah, so it's maybe coming from my more gaming passion that I have, where I have a lot of different examples of how do you make a nice I don't want to say gaming experience, but interactive experience. And I think we should, and everyone is getting inspired from that. Even on the broadcast side, we have more and more influencer content that is also used by the broadcaster and etc. to give a more engaging and interactive way of creating the content. And I think for immersive, it should be the same. And even more that when you are using those XR devices, you are so much into the content that you need to keep people engaged. And I think that just not watching some content that is pushed to your eyes, you could also participate into this content and make it your own style or your own way, and just like interact with the content. In this interaction can be made by a lot of different avenues. You can click and then go to another position, or you can select a different camera. Maybe you can change the angle. You can also interact with pop-ups that are branded and sponsored, so that is more like monetization opportunity. But also, I've seen a stat on internet that the brand recall lift is twice more important than when it is done immersive. So it means that when you have a brand and then you can click on it, that you can see in 3D, that you are really feeling in the space, then you have better brand recall lift. So it means that you will remember this brand much more longer or much more stronger. And that is something really to leverage to the brands. And I think is again another opportunity to monetize. But just so to come back to go back on the interactive aspect, I think really that it is key to keep engaged on a long term this young audience, because they tend to multitask. And I think if we can keep them multitasking with the content, then I think it will be way more interesting for everyone.
Laurence, do you maybe at this point want to share how you envision your kids to consume E1 content in the future? I make you say this every time, but please, how do you envision E1 content consumption in the future?
So I think I even said this the first time we ever spoke, Lucy, but my vision is that in the future, while my wife and I might be sitting back on our sofa watching an E1 race, my son is sitting on the sofa next to us, but with a headset on, taking part in the race. I think that's the future for sports like ours, for challenger sports, is you have to find interesting, interactive ways for your audience to engage with your content. And I think it doesn't need to be as interactive as taking part in the race. Just being able to customize your feed, customize the audio, change what you're listening to, change the view you're watching from, look at a different type of graphics overlay. As Charles said, maybe you can switch which boat you're in the race. But the critical thing is that you have some agency in your viewing, and you're not just being presented with a final cut that you sit back and consume, but you're actually leaning forward and taking part in an experience and having some options for how you consume it.
That's very much echoing what you said, Charles, right? And one of these things that we want to test, and this is so key within the XRSA, is if we give the user the autonomy, right, the freedom to choose their camera angles, how to balance it. What is the autonomy percentage that we should give to the user, because maybe they would be overwhelmed or maybe they would actually like it. So what is the balance and that ideal user experience? So these are the things that we would test within the alliance. All right. But now, thank you very much. I want to switch things up a bit with a new segment, which I'm calling Turn the Tables. Usually in our day-to-day business, it's always Accedo, E1, or partners like ours that have to convince and pitch and explain why XR matters to rights owners like you, Laurence. But today we're reversing the roles. And Laurence, you're going to be put in the hot seat and you'll defend XR and you're going to sell XR to us. And that's to us, the people that normally sell it to you. So Charles and I will ask you tough questions. Or Charles, do you want to ask questions or answer questions?
I mean, I can do both.
Okay, cool. Then maybe you answer the questions. I will be asking the tough questions this time. And sorry, Lawrence, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I know you're great at this, so I'm actually putting you on the spot. So are you guys ready?
I mean, no pressure. Yes, I'm ready.
Okay, cool. One of the most common questions that we get asked is XR sounds great, but what's the revenue? Because hardware adoption is still low compared to other mass market devices. How would you defend XR?
Build it and they will come is the thing I would say. And you have to get on at some point to the XR bus. Make sure you do it before everybody else is already on and there's no places left. But I think critically, we need to learn what's going to work in XR, and it is going to be distinct for each sport, and there's going to be a journey to go on. I'm absolutely convinced that XR is going to be part of every single rights owner's content mix within 5 years. If you're not early onto this, then you're going to miss opportunities. Those will be opportunities to win new fans, but also opportunities to find new monetization angles with your partners and new partners in the future. One of the things that we found out from the XRSA deployment with E1 is that the brand recall for the brands that were featured within our content was really, really high for the experimental users. So there's opportunities in building new fan bases, but there's also opportunities in finding new partnerships and expanding the reach of existing partnerships.
Very good answer, noted. Charles, please.
Yeah, no, I want to follow what Laurence just said, because I have I have a counter question for you that will answer to your question, of course. What do you think is the main success driver of the iPhone? Don't ask. I have the answer. I have my answer. I don't know if it's official, but I believe it is not because it had a camera. I believe it not because it was a small computer in the pocket. I believe it was because there is the Apple Store, and the Apple Store was a way to provide a lot of different apps, but apps is content. And so I think that because there was a lot of content to consume on the iPhone, everyone wanted the iPhone because they could do a lot of different things and consume their content on their pocket. And I think it's the same kind of principle we should have with the XR, and that we need to start producing content so then we give a reason for people to just go on the device. And it's exactly like Lauren said, we need to start creating content. And I think this will really be the driver for user acquisition on this device. And something also is that in terms of revenue, maybe you can have this philosophy of having more a mid-term, long-term kind of roadmap, but you can also activate and monetize on a short term with in-stadium or in-venue activations with your fans. It can be premium experience to your VIP or things like that, where you have captured 10 minutes, for example, footage that is super nice. You have added storytelling, behind the scene content, and etc. And that is something you provide for as an in-venue experience. And that has, to be honest, some value already, I think.
This is the typical chicken and egg problem, right? People would ask, why should we produce content for hardware that's not mass market yet? But how could people actually be convinced to purchase hardware if there's no valuable content for them to consume? And the good thing right now is we're seeing many more sports right owners trying to invest into this space, right? Trying to build up their content archive or content inventory in an immersive. And then slowly, hopefully, we will get more valuable content for people to consume. And that way, the hardware will get more attractive as well. But I like your answers, guys. Next question. What KPIs would you realistically use to measure success in year one?
Oh, this is hard not to answer in a really boring way. Look, what we want is users on the platform, and long engagement times, and ideally people coming back. I mean, they're quite simple digital metrics, I think, but they surely should be the ones that we're judging experiential content like this with, in the same way as we would if it was traditional social media content or a web platform.
And something maybe to add on, let me know if you agree with this, Laurence, but on your perspective, I think also we should focus on the conversion of your current audience, not maybe trying to get new fans directly from the start, because it may be hard to say, okay, I'm going to watch a new sport where I have no emotion linked to or no any background whatsoever, and then going to the immersive device and trying to watch it. On the other hand, you could also argue that because some people are just like early adopters and things like that, they are going to have a device. And then if you have also content and you are the only sports to have content, most likely they are going to watch your content and maybe create some emotional bound. But I would say that the focus should be more about sending, your audience and trying to convince them that the immersive content is good. So you create a good size of audience actively participating into this immersive content, and then you maybe focus more on the acquisition part, KPI.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. It's a really good way of extending your influence on existing fans and getting them closer to what you're doing as an organization.
Many people actually, or many sports right owners actually struggle before even thinking about user acquisition, right? Many of them tell us that even if they would want to do something in XR, their limitations in their rights, in the rights structure, actually prevent them to do these kind of XR productions or broadcasting them. What would be your advice, Laurence, how to start if you're restricted in your life rights?
Well, the first thing I'd say is that live is the hardest thing to do and isn't necessarily going to be the most effective. So what we saw from the deployment and the results of the content that Charles and the team put together was that non-live content, feature content, really strong storytelling was the standout content. And everybody is in a position to tell stories around the edges of their sports that require no rights. So I would say that live rights should not be a limitation. In fact, not should. Live rights are not a limitation for your ability to create experiential and extended reality content.
Interesting. Charles, I know that you're working on, huge projects as well in XR. What's your approach there as HBS? How to advise people to start?
To be honest, our approach is more about building an experience that is good enough so we can have people taking the service, for example, or willing to provide this to their fans, uh, and as low cost as possible. Because we think that to repeat, to go into this create content to bring fans and etc., we need also to get the most chances as possible for this content to be created, and for that, to be honest, as the market is not so much ready yet in terms of monetization of this audience, we need to do some compromise, and those compromise is probably on the cost. So the entry barrier is lower, basically. So that's why we're trying to find the balance between the most interesting experience. So let's say 80% of the perfect experience, but at the same time, at the lowest cost as possible. So we can provide this as most different territories as possible. That's really our vision currently.
So it's really about balancing cost and the quality of experience. How can we create a great experience that would capture people's attention today at a low cost to actually start building up that user base, right?
Yeah, for example, if you have a feature that is amazing, but that raise your cost by twice, and then it will mean that the broadcaster or the federation or whoever doesn't want to invest that money, then it kind of counterbalance this attractivity of this new feature. So yeah, as you said, trying to find the right balance between all of that.
Hmm. Well, it's still a huge endeavor, but we are very confident that we're actually now entering a turning point in time. That's why we put together the XR Sports Alliance. And thank you guys for joining this. We're trying to wrap up all of this. This deployment with E1 was just the beginning. And we're so proud of you guys, of the team, of everyone who joined our XR Sports Alliance. But really, to put this first deployment together in 2026 is going to be even more exciting because we're adding like more to our pipeline. It's just exciting to imagine what the next experiments could bring us in addition to everything we've already learned with E1 series. So to wrap up our conversation, what's the one thing that you hope the listeners take away from today's episode about XR in sports? Laurence, do you want to start?
Sure. So I think what I would say is, even if you don't think now is the right time, you should be looking at experiential and immersive content gathering, because it will lead to creative thoughts and it will give you ideas about what you could be doing differently now, but also in the future. So I would say, whatever your sport, whatever your federation, you should be looking at immersive. You should be speaking to the XRSA, and you should be learning about what the future has in hold for you, because this is the future.
Thank you, Laurence. Charles, what about you?
What can I add on top of that? Just go XR. Go XR, guys. I mean, start learning now. It will also benefit into building your archive when the market will be ready and you will be able to monetize this content. You can use it on your social media. We've talked about over benefits. So really, I think, as said, Laurence, everyone should start looking at it now and trying to build a roadmap on the midterm and long term around the XR.
Especially now because we're seeing so many big investments of all of the big tech players, right? Everybody's joining the XR platform now, this new medium. People are investing more into content, but also into hardware. So now it's really the time to join this XR road. Laurence, Charles, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for this incredible partnership that made this entire first deployment possible. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in to the Accedo Playback podcast. If you want to follow the progress of the XR Sports Alliance or learn more about our upcoming experiments and what we're up to, make sure to follow Accedo or XR Sports Alliance on LinkedIn. So until next time, thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. Thank you, Laurence.
Thank you, Lucy.
Thank
Good
you,
to see
everyone.
you, Charles.